Another Father's Day is come and gone, and I find myself thinking of my father, who is no longer with us. Let's have ourselves a pocket sized pep talk, and I'll tell you a bit about him. Maybe it will allow you to reflect on your father or someone you love.
A Pocket Sized Pep Talk, the podcast that can help energize your business and your life with a quick, inspiring message. Now, here's your host, Rob Jolles.
Father's Day is bittersweet for me because I think of my dad and I smile a bit and I get a bit emotional. A bit. On October 30th, 1923, my father, Lee Jolles, was born. He passed away some years ago. Can't tell you the day or even the year. It's a date I refuse to remember. I choose instead to remember his birth. I think I can sum him up in two words. First word came to me in the mail when I was 8 years old. One of my many jobs was to retrieve the day's mail, and I began to notice with regularity that a number of letters were addressed to Lion Lee Jolles. I had no idea what that was, or that he was in the Lions Club, or there was even such an organization. I thought it was interesting that somehow the post office knew so much about him because he was a lion of a man. A lion of a man left his mark on his country by fighting in multiple wars, not just surviving, but surviving D-Day on Omaha Beach, when he was part of the fifth wave of the invasion force. Like many of that era, he didn't talk much about it until years later. He simply accepted and endured the emotional pain of these events. As he once told me, that's what soldiers do. This lion never took a backseat to standing up for what he thought was right, and that meant leaving his mark on a few chins, including one unlucky chin in Veterans Stadium in Philadelphia when an Eagles fan decided it was okay to be belligerent and wander down to what was then the Redskin fans. We hear so much about those famous Philadelphia fans and the abuse they heap on opposing teams and fans. Well, they messed with the wrong lion that day. He left his mark on the needy in so many ways. A member of the Lions Club for over 52 years, he tirelessly helped raise money for the blind and visually challenged. But that's far from the extent of his service to others. Decade after decade, he proudly gave his time, energy, and muscle to so many charities. Once retired in Florida, with my mom Judy at his side, into his late 70s, their days often began at 7 a.m., picking up food from the supermarkets and distributing these foods to homeless shelters, shelters for abused children, and AIDS patients. Into his 80s, he worked almost daily at the Lions Club Thrift Center. He not only gave of his time, he constantly gave the young, less fortunate children candy and toys he paid for from his own pocket. He left his mark on his community by leading multiple scout troops. His scout troops were legendary, his teaching unique, and his ability to inspire so great that in 1968, he took over a second troop of 7 boys, led them into competition against 52 other troops that year, and won. In 1969, as the troop began to grow, he led 2 patrols into that same competition and won first and second place. In 1970, he led 3 patrols and won first, second, and third. He created a scouting experience so profound that his little troop of 7 expanded to 140 boys in less than 3 years, and I was one of them. He left his mark on his family by sharing his love and his love of animals, and most importantly, being there. He was an amazing salesman, amassing decades of awards, and yet, if you asked him, his greatest accomplishment was being home with his family, no later than 5 p.m., just about every day of his life. This from a profession that required a great deal of nighttime appointments for success. He just figured out a different way to conduct his business because he would not compromise on time away from his family. That's what we call walking the walk. The fact is, this lion left his mark not just by what he did, but by what he taught us. He taught us not to just lead, but to charge. To not just win, but to dominate. To not just teach, but to inspire. to not just confront, but to punch that other SOB in the mouth if that's what was called for. To not just help the needy, but to dedicate your life to the less fortunate. To not just speak, but to roar. These were just some of the lessons of this lion. And those who knew him were blessed. Because these lessons and these spirit, so vividly displayed, run through a lot of us. I like to call it the Jolles gene. And if you have Jolles blood or that Jolles gene moving through your veins, you understand. And if you're not of this blood and you have contact with us, you understand too, because we have a tendency to infect those around us. We are lions because we lived amongst this lion. I thank God every day for this gene that my father placed within me. Some would say that my father's passing marked the end of an era when lions like this man and his brothers and sisters ruled this earth. I cannot and will not accept that. At his passing, I pledged my words as the son of this lion to honor my father by continuing the legacy he left. In this podcast, I ask you to join me. We can charge, and we can dominate, we can inspire, and we can innovate. We can stand up for ourselves when it's called for, and we can help the less fortunate. And by all means, we can roar. I told you there were two words that summed up my father, so I'll finish this podcast by providing the second. Once again, I take you back to the mailbox and the day the post office threw a curveball at me, just as I got comfortable with these letters to Lion Lee Jolles. Seemed he got promoted and forgot to tell his now 9-year-old son. Never one to sit on the sidelines of any club or organization he belonged to. He didn't just participate as a lion. He became his club's president 5 separate times. I'm sure some of you know what they call the leader of the Lions Club. It started appearing on letters I was walking up to the house. And you know, I didn't even flinch this time. It just made sense. The letters were addressed to King Lion Lee Jolles. I miss walking with you, King Lion. You truly made this family, this country, this world, and all you touched a better place. And I will never forget your roar.
Thanks so much for listening. If you enjoyed today's show, please rate and recommend it on iTunes, Outcast, or wherever you get your podcasts. You can also get more information on this show and Rob at jolles.com.